Hi, everybody. I just want to take a moment to kind of hit the refresh button after last week's discussion with our Connected Learning Professional Development series, and where we talk specifically about production-centered design. You'll have to forgive my screen as I am in edit mode with Wix because they're having a few technical difficulties, and the only way that I could do a screencast is through my editing tool. So here's hoping Wix gets straightened out so we can enjoy more of these resources. To kind of reiterate some things that we talked about last week, remember we talked about interest-driven learning, the idea that we're speaking to our students' interests when we think about things that we challenge them to do in our classrooms. We talked about peer-supported learning, not necessarily collaboration, but the idea of where peers can offer feedback and other supportive outlets to enhance learning experience. And we also talked about academic centered or academic oriented learning, and the fact that really encompassing some of the things that we naturally do in class related to academics. So what we talked about last week in terms of production-centered design, it's not necessarily the idea of just producing something, but it's the idea that we're creating an environment where students see meaning and purpose behind what they create. So I'm kind of going off of that big tagline up at the top of our resources here. It's one thing that we may ask them to actually produce something, but it's the other thing that there's meaning and purpose that advocate for student voice and student demonstration. As I kind of take you through the rest of these resources here, I wanted to kind of point out a few things that technical difficulties didn't allow us to do last week. So thinking about production-centered design, this is not necessarily something that's just an artifact or the idea that we are just implementing a tool. It's the idea that students are producing knowledge at a deeper level, knowing that they are solving a problem or they're being creative in their exploration of all this material that you're asking them to produce. They're developing voice and agency, and social and cultural capital really speaks to something that means something to them, and not just doing it because it's just an assignment. If you scroll down a little bit more with me, you'll see some additional stories from our field. There are two educators that speak about this specifically. I'll be sure to go in and revise our website here to give you the links to these particular teachers who have actually published their work as well. Pretty interesting stuff and the things that they do in their classrooms in terms of the actual depth of what production center really looks like and what they're having them do with kids. And as I'm sure you're probably making connections from last week, and then we keep talking about this concept again, understand that we don't talk about these concepts under connected learning in a separate entity. You could have very much interest-driven production-centered classroom. These things hopefully are going to start overlapping as you start making connection threads to the framework that we're trying to kind of break down into pieces. And so then in our actual session, we had an opportunity for you to produce some sort of visual, and we gave very vague guidelines on that concept of how something that is valued in your classroom or something that is valued in your teaching environment. Some of you created graphics, some of you actually took pictures, some of you took video, some of you took and created Wordles and different type of organizer type presentation. So the production of demonstrating what you actually value as a teacher in your classroom to make that visual definitely was a very vast variety that we have up on our Twitter page. Under the hashtag, I'll highlight here, under the hashtag of Hayworth Connected and Hayworth Values, if you're interested in checking out some of those images. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, which I felt time really didn't allow us to do that, is our challenge for this month. So our challenge actually breaks down into a choice challenge. You could do one or the other. The first type of production-centered design challenge that you could potentially participate in throughout this professional development month is producing a teaching artifact that helps you promote your teaching values and integrate aspects of connected learning that we've discussed so far. A really good example of this that I've seen this week through one of the Genius Hours that I'm hosting right now with my 8th graders is that she wanted to study teaching philosophies. And in the survey data that she received from other high school teachers, she has turned that data into infographics for her incoming freshman class that she's a part of. So an example of a teaching artifact that could help you promote your teaching would be to create maybe something similar. You know, the production that you're creating will help you explain yourself and your philosophies and what you value and what you believe and what you think to your students in that form of an infographic. That's just one of, this can go on in so many different ways, as we saw just briefly with our challenge last week with the visuals that we value. What you could do for a teaching artifact could be so many different ways. In addition to that, or your other choice for that is to design a lesson that requires students to produce an artifact that demonstrates learning. So it's not just something that you're wanting them to do. It's something that allows them the freedom, gives them the agency, gives them the voice to create something that's meaningful, something that's purposeful, that demonstrates the learning that's happening in your class. Please know that, and I'm going to kind of throw a plug in for our different types of frameworks, or different type of elements in our framework. If you'd like to be peer supported on this one, you want somebody to brainstorm with us, I'll be happy to do that. But we are all professionals and we all have a lot of really good ideas, and we are our own best resources. So reach out and peer support each other. There's lots of different things that we can think of in either doing, that teaching artifact to try and think about production-centered learning or design, or looking at a lesson that we could potentially tweak to embody this production center design. A couple of other things that are on here that I just want to point out, because again, time kind of ran away from us last week, is that we have our guiding questions. These guiding questions, as I'm sure you might recognize, are same confessional questions. I have to admit, I have only received just a couple of confessionals. So if you're still interested in really digging and reflecting in your practice, it's not too late to think about these things, especially when moving forward into this challenge. And then I also wanted to share my tweet that I did from earlier this year. You might have remembered the author that visited our building, Nick Stone. We had an opportunity to do a research unit surrounded as an inspiration from that book. And then as a result of that research, students had to cultivate an awareness campaign around some sort of research-based topic that was kind of generated from their questions. The one collage that you see down here is a collage of student products that revolved around research relating to gang life and understanding the formation of gangs, the history of gangs, because the book itself talks breadths of gang life, and our kids aren't really familiar with that kind of facet of our society and wanted to know more about that. And so as they were trying to discover that, we wanted to think about, well, how could we create awareness for other people who may not know the things that we do? And we created these various media projects, anywhere from print media to social media to online resources, etc. So this is just kind of a smattering or a collage of some of those different types of collections. So it wasn't just, in my room, it wasn't just reading the novel and creating something as a result of reading that novel. It was reading that novel, and we asked questions and we did research. And then with that research, we sat back and we asked, what can we do with this information? And we came up with, in educating and informing others. So this just kind of gives you just kind of a interesting way to think about production center learning. I wanted to keep this short and sweet, just to kind of reiterate some things that we've been talking about. Like I said, if you want to brainstorm or if you have any questions, feel free to contact me anytime. Thanks. Bye.